There was a Truffaut movie called The Wild Child. It's a great movie. Truffaut plays this doctor. He finds a child out in the middle of the woods, a wild child who would bathe the moon at night and raised by animals. That was the idea. And the voiceover, the use of the voiceover is very dramatic and really good. And we loved that voiceover. And so we tried to sometimes, we would refer to that with each other. You know, how can we use the voiceover that we have the way Truffaut used it in The Wild Child? And what it meant was sometimes Truffaut would talk about something the Wild Child had done in the voiceover, and you'd see him actually writing in his journal, and then you'd hear his voice. But then Truffaut would do a thing like, I wonder what would happen if I did this. I had to find out. Gave it a real wonderful dramatic quality.
We'd hide out like spies somewhere in the north where people didn't ask a lot of questions. I could have snuck out the back or hid in the boiler room, I suppose, but I sensed that my destiny now lay with Kit, for better or for worse, and that it was better to spend a week with one who loved me for what I was than years of loneliness.
The way Terry writes voiceover has been an evolutionary process. It started in Badlands. You know, he was trying to write the voiceover for Badlands to make it a little bit sound like a romance magazine, and which was he was very conscious of him trying to do that. And not necessarily telling the story, but telling the story through the language of a romance magazine.
That they were gone forever.
But then later, in other movies, we discovered other ways to deal with voiceover. At first, you know, like Days of Heaven was never intended to have voiceover, and then ended up having Linda's voiceover, which became a huge element in it and very memorable aspect of the film. But that came about through experimentation. We first tried writing it. Terry tried writing her voiceover, and it wasn't working very well. And you know, this was the same person writing the voiceover that wrote it for Badlands, but it wasn't working. Till we accidentally discovered a great way to tell the voiceover was for Linda to look at a scene and tell us what happened in the scene.
From the time the sun went up till it went down, they were working all the time. No, non-stop. Just keep going. You didn't work, they'd ship you right out of there.
It really opened up a whole new world for him to start thinking about it, and then he could write stuff that was more along those lines, and we could combine that with Linda's view of what happened and what Terry wanted her to be saying. It helped a lot. And that was different. The process for Badlands wasn't like that. The process for Badlands was Terry had written the voiceover. He knew what it wanted to sound like, what he wanted it to sound like, and Sissy recorded a bunch of it. And we cut it into the movie, and then we were able to add more when we could see what worked. And so it was experimental a little in Badlands, but then in later movies it became much more of an experimental process, and we ended up recording much more. Badlands, we recorded the smallest amount of voiceover compared to the others, but we used more voiceover in Badlands than we did in the other movies. So it's interesting, the difference.
He never seemed like a violent person before, except for once, when he said he'd like to rub out a couple of guys whose names he didn't care to mention. It all goes to show how you can know a person and not really know him at the same time.